when your relationships are a one-way street. I'm going to use a metaphor because I think that it will help you and I think it'll make sense. There are obviously literally physical one-way streets that you can drive down, right? Now, when you stop at a stop sign and you're about to turn on a one-way street, turn the only way that is permitted, whether it's left or right. You're not looking the way that the vehicles would be coming from, right? Because there's nothing there. And that's fascinating because one-way relationships, one-sided relationships are the same way. But you might still be looking, even though there's nothing that's going to be coming. I like that metaphor, I really do. A lot of my relationships throughout my entire life, both platonic and romantic, have been one-way streets. And I'm looking at, years ago. It's so fascinating, the dynamic of a one-way street relationship, or you could just call it a one-way relationship, right? People that get themselves into one-way relationships are usually used to dynamics that are not healthy, dynamics that are not reciprocated, dynamics that are not mutual, they're not fair, right? They really never knew the back and forth dynamic of relationships of give and take, right? And it's just fascinating to me because there are two things that I want to look at here, that if these things don't happen in early childhood for an individual, it's probably more likely that they're going to find themselves in relationships that are, one-way streets, that really don't offer them anything of value, right? Individuation and differentiation are two things that are healthy in childhood, but they don't always happen for every person, right? Individuation is basically separating yourself away from your family of origin. Differentiation, in terms of individuation, how you think, how you feel, how you behave. Really developing your own self, right? Separate from everyone else. Differentiation is pretty much where boundaries come into place. Differentiating between self and other. My stuff, your stuff. Boundary, right? People who find themselves in unhealthy relationships where it's pretty much just a one-way street, there's a massive aspect of a lack of differentiation here, right? Why? Because people that are undifferentiated, they tend to seek other people to be responsible for their stuff that other people are really not responsible for. I have actually found myself taking on a fuck ton of responsibility that I never needed to, that was never really my place to take on, because that was dynamic, that was a dynamic that I learned and became very familiar with, right? And so the reason why I present these elements of individuation, differentiation, is because an adult that has done and gone through healthy individuation and differentiation, they understand, this is my shit, not yours. You are responsible for your stuff, I'm responsible for my stuff, right? There's going to be a healthy dynamic here. I'm not going to throw my shit at you, and I'm not going to tolerate you throwing your shit at me. Unhealthy I almost said individuations. Unhealthy individuals, they probably haven't individuated, and they probably are also undifferentiated, right? And with that, they're a lot less likely, obviously because they don't have, either they don't have healthy boundaries and they have permeable boundaries, or they literally don't have boundaries altogether, depending on how they developed as a person, depending on how their ego state developed, right? A healthy ego state has boundaries, healthy boundaries. An unhealthy ego state, or a disfigured ego state, might find themselves feeling responsible for other people, right? And that's just the way that it is. Some people's ego states didn't develop at all, right? And they actually lack boundaries. And so, the fascinating thing is that if you find yourself in relationships with people that feel like a one-way street, it's because they are a one-way street, right? It's not like they have anything really to offer you, and even if they did, they wouldn't be interested in giving it because they don't believe. It's not that they don't believe in a mutual give and take. It's that they are there was some level of probably arrested development emotionally for them that they're just incapable of that. Like it's not a matter of whether or not they're interested in it. It's a matter of incapability. For example, um, unless I somehow, I don't know, strap wings to my arms and I learn how to fly with wings strapped to my arms, I am incapable of flying, right? People that had certain levels of arrested development emotionally, right? Usually very, very early on in life, either, as a toddler or as an infant, they are actually incapable of interest for a healthy relationship, of mutual back and forth give and take, right? And so if you find yourself in relationships with people like this, whether it's platonic or romantic, it could be both, and it could be multiple, it could be several, depending on your dynamic as an individual, depending on what it is that you learned, right? What it is that you believe you're supposed to do as a person, right? It's fascinating here, too, because let me make this very clear. Somebody who learned to be exceedingly overly responsible for other people, right? I mean, like, this is obviously a clearly unhealthy dynamic, but somebody who learned to be so exceedingly overly responsible for other people would be a perfect puzzle fit, a perfect goodness of fit. It wouldn't be healthy, but it'd be a goodness of fit for somebody who, say, is, like, totally irresponsible, right? Like, two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Um, totally overly responsible, totally under responsible, right? Total lack of responsibility. They're going to fit. This person is attractive to this person because this person learned to take on a fuck ton of responsibility in life, right? So this person is going to see this person and they're going to be like, oh, I need to do all these things for this person. I need to give, one-way street, right? And that's just one example. But that's just the reality of how it works. You might find yourself in relationships with people like this. Again, it could be a friend, it could be a partner, it doesn't matter. What matters is that what's recognized is your dynamic, right? And you also recognize how that fits into other people's dynamic, right? Throughout my entire life, I have found myself feeling so responsible for other people, obviously unhealthy, and really just seeing it for what it is, right? Um, Somebody who has or was, um, they had arrested development emotionally very early on in life. They're going to seek out people that will be responsible for them, right? And that's just the way that it is, right? But people that are emotionally immature, that had that arrested development, they are incapable of holding relationships with people that are back and forth, give and take, mutual, right? A two-sided street, right? You can drive that way, you can also drive that way, right? But for, one-sided relationships, there's really no point in looking that way, right? Especially when the sign is pointed that way, because there's nothing coming from that way. Similarly, in a relationship with a one-sided street, there's really no point in looking that way, right? Because you're giving that way, but there's nothing coming from that way. And there's not going to be anything that comes from that way. I mean, there might be, I'll use the term intermittent stuff, right? Whether physical or affection, whatever it is, right? Why? Because that's what you're used to. And it'll keep you there. Because that's comfortable for you, that's familiar, right? And so that little bit will be enough to keep you there, right? And it's intermittent, it's not consistent, it's on and off, it's crumbs, and that's the way that it works. But again, there's really no point in looking that way because there's nothing consistently there.